You're watching Strat News Global. I'm Amitabh Brevi, and joining us from Bangkok is Hui Yee Tan. She's the Indochina Bureau Chief of the Straits Times. Hui Yee, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Amit, for inviting me.
Just wanted to get a sense of how the pro-democracy, pro-reform protests are going in terms of the momentum. Now, many would say that the protests actually started maybe last year, maybe in February, and started gaining momentum in July. So it's been over 4 months. What is its momentum and how widespread is it outside Bangkok?
I would say the momentum of these protests have been sustained since around July or August. Although it's hard to see where and how this may end, there are currently few signs of compromise by the government. These protests, as you know, started around February after the Future Forward Party got dissolved. Uh, Young people saw this as an attempt by the royalist military establishment to remove any threat to its political dominance. After a few months pause because of COVID-19, they really took off around July, and especially after they began making demands for monarchy reform. The king, as you know, took personal ownership of the crown assets as well as personal control of two army units after he ascended the throne. And the students want to bring his powers in line with that under a constitutional monarchy. And Thailand is technically a constitutional monarchy. As for the question of how widespread these protests are, the biggest protests so far we can see are in Bangkok. Each time a protest is called, we do see uh, thousands of them at a certain location. At the same time, we are seeing concurrent protests outside of Bangkok, or although the numbers are a lot lower in those locations.
You talked, Hui, about many of the demands, and broadly speaking, there seem to be three. One is that the Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha should resign, constitutional reform, and monarchical reform as well. And the pictures that we've seen circulating over the months, of course, the now legendary three-finger salute from the Hunger Games franchise. Tell us a little bit more about why these demands have come about.
Well, the constitution was drafted under military rule, which has specific provisions which the students argue concentrate power in the hands of the royalist military establishment. So that was a key item that the students want fixed. At the same, with regards to your question about this three finger salute, yes, it did come up the Hunger Games, but at the same time, I think over the past few months, it's been appropriated into a symbol against dictatorship.
Sure. In terms of how the government is responding, I do know that Parliament is looking at some of the issues, but that would be a long-term solution, right? I mean, the protesters are looking for some kind of change.
Yes, in terms of the larger demands of the students, I see few signs of compromise so far. Prime Minister Prayut has said he is not going to resign. The government coalition appears to be dragging its feet about constitutional reform, and they have explicitly said they will not touch the sections in the constitution that touch on the role of the monarchy. And the government has tried to control these protests by declaring a state of serious emergency, but then it was forced to cancel it because it made people angrier and drove even more people onto the streets. Police, meanwhile, they have been steadily arresting these protesters and charging the protest leaders after each demonstration.
In terms of the monarchy's response, we've seen a German government response to what had happened in the recent few weeks about the king and his role in Thai governance from German soil. But we also saw a short soundbite interview, if you can call it that, to a channel that the King Rama X had also given when he returned. What's been the monarchy's public and any other private response that you can tell us about?
Well, I'm not aware of any private response. As you know, what we saw in that impromptu interview with Channel 4 was that he said, to the about the protesters, he said we love them all the same. And then he was asked if there's well any room for compromise. He said Thailand is the land of compromise. But I would say that since then we have seen few signs that the government is willing to address the students' demands. On Sunday, for example, the demonstrators gathered and they wrote letters of demand to deliver to the king. And those letters, as far as I know, are being kept by the police and they are being examined for any sign of illegal content.
In terms of, you spoke about how the police have been taking action against the protesters under different laws. Of course, Thailand has the most stringent les majest laws against anyone who speaking against or talking against the monarchy itself. But how do you see that going, and how are the protesters responding to these various charges that are being brought against them?
Well, they see it as a long-term game. The students are aware that as they continue sustaining these protests, that more and more charges will be brought against them. And but that has not stopped them from organizing even more protests. And they realize that it is a strategy of the government to wear them down with some of these charges can be very small charges like for example dirtying the public place, using certain equipment they're not allowed to in a demonstration. Uh, and of course, some of the more serious charges include sedition.
In terms of response from both sides are aware that it shouldn't escalate. So there is some degree or level of control that is being maintained over both the protesters, the police or the security forces, and the pro-monarchist lobby as well.
Well, I would say that both sides are aware that the minute violence is used, it would delegitimize them. The students, for example, have been very careful to not use violence during their demonstrations, and they've been very careful to not provoke violence. And the government as well, because it realized that the minute it uses violence against these students who are very young, some of them are 14, 15 years old, it sparks an even bigger response from people who may have been on the sidelines before the incident.
When you're talking about the two sides, there seems to be a divide in terms of the age group. Of the pro democracy and the pro reform group seem to be young, like you're pointing out, almost some of them school children, and the pro monarchists seem to be more in their 50s. Is that a correct assessment?
Yes, there is a generational divide. And I think when I speak to the monarchists, they themselves acknowledge that there is a generational divide. A lot of them do not uh, understand. Well, I would say some of them do not quite understand where is it coming from because they grew up in an era where you do not question the monarch, and it was an untouchable topic. Uh, but at the same time, these students have brought discussion about the role of the monarchy out into the open, and they are saying that it is about time to talk about this and address this in public.
And as you're pointing out, the momentum has been sustained over the months. They are in for it for the long term. They're aware of that. But where do you see the situation going in the near future, Hui Yee?
That's really hard to say. I mean, we can argue about the numbers and say that the demonstrations appear to be getting smaller by a few thousand, here and there. But I would And also there are also smaller protests taking place outside of Bangkok. But I would say that the biggest impact that the students have made so far is that they have addressed this deeply taboo topic of the monarchy and brought it out into the open. And because of that, we are seeing a lot more discussion about the role of the monarchy in Thailand. As for whether it would lead to major changes down the road, that's still too early to say.
Hui Yee Tan, again, appreciate your time and for giving us insights on the situation in Thailand. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amit.
And you can log on to our website to get the latest news and analysis from an Indian perspective. If you do like our kind of journalism, do support us on Strat News Global. I'm Amitabh Brady.